Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome into another edition of the program as we have a very, very special show today because, this is one of my favorite segments because, we always have so much fun talking about all the different topics, and Gary Kaye, Tech 50 Plus, and, this is going to be a show focusing on issues, solutions, technologies, innovations, products, things like that for, just like the website implies, an over 50 audience. And you can find, a lot of great information over at Tech 50 Plus. But we have Gary Kaye on the program to talk here with our audience about, what's new, what's happening, and what you should pay attention to. So before we get into, all the conversation with Gary Kaye, we have a few things to mention, including computeramerica.com, and that will have a link to any and everything that we talk about, a list of topics, just if you are lazy and you just want to sit back and relax and enjoy the show, well, everything is going to be in the show notes for you to, peruse later. Also, while you're at Computer America, be sure to enter the social media contest, giving away an M720 triathlon mouse tomorrow. That, by the way, is a mouse that can control, get this, up to 3 devices at the same time. Well, you have to press a button and you switch from one to the other, but at the same time, it's a very, very cool mouse, and happy to give that away in partner with Logitech. And the last thing is the video portion, where you can watch Computer America and not just listen to Computer America. A lot of fun, just, very proud of it, and just another way to experience what we do here at the show. And let's see. Last thing is I also want to extend another greeting, another welcome into Computer America's newest sponsor, Fire Dragon Security. They work with intrusion detection systems, and they do something that really I've never seen anyone else do, with a constant monitoring of your traffic and really, get to the root of advanced persistent threats. And if any of that was confusing, or if any of that you don't know about, be sure to go back into our archives where we actually interviewed Fire Dragon Security, and we are ever so pleased to have them on as Computer America's newest sponsor. Just want to give a little shout out there. So I think with all of that out of the way, we are just going to jump into today's interview. And again, for anyone out there who maybe this is your first time hearing about Tech 50 Plus or Gary Kaye himself, this is a website focused on, that's right, an audience of, who are getting on there in age, and maybe, you want to learn new things that help you experience the world in a more complete, full way like you used to. They have a great section like we've talked about here last month about e-bikes and that kind of thing. And today we have a whole list of topics that we're going to get to. It's going to be a lot of fun. So welcome on founder and chief content officer, Mr. Gary Kaye. So Gary, thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Nice to be here, Ben.
Yeah, and for anyone out there, that's right. He sounds a little bit different because you are actually traveling for business, as I understand it. So
That's correct.
So
I'm in Manhattan and I'm in a closet.
Well, who hasn't woken up and found themselves in that exact situation once in their lives? So, but you're here with us. We're going to make the most of it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, I think we're going to kick things off with something that we've been talking about here on the show this week, something that we have talked about with you on the program before. But again, for newcomers, what is this idea of telemedicine, and how has it actually helped you individually.
Well, the notion of telemedicine has actually been around for a few years now, but it's been very slow in implementation for a fairly substantial variety of reasons. But basically, it means interacting with your doctor or other care provider by electronic means rather than face to face. And the first impediment was that there was no way for your care providers to get paid for it. And then just under 2 years ago, that changed when the Medicare folks, CMS, actually said, you know what, we're going to start paying for this because we think that it's actually a very cost-effective way for doctors to see more patients. So now doctors can be reimbursed. I think it's about $42 a month per patient. Now that doesn't sound like much, but if you have a practice with 500 or 1,000 patients, that adds up to some pretty decent change in the course of a month.
Right, and just real quick, I mean, that's not just that may be money that, let's face it, if you wanted to give your patients the proper care, sometimes you were taking phone calls from patients, or kind of over, kind of during your off hours. So this is actually paying for something that doctors were already kind of doing themselves.
Right. Now, a key component of this is being able to see as well as hear. And so a lot of telemedicine is being done with smartphones, on tablets, and so on, so that your care provider can actually see what you look like. I actually used this a couple of months ago after I had a kidney transplant, and was able to do what they call virtual visits with my transplant team at Yale New Haven Hospital, where I was able to pull out my iPad and show them how my surgery was healing. And it saved me a couple of hours in schlepping down to the hospitals, waiting in the waiting room, seeing someone, and then driving all the way home again. Certainly far more cost effective from my perspective, and pretty cost effective from their perspective as well, because they could do a lot of patients in a shorter period of time. I mean, one of the things that the team there, or actually the lead doctor on the team, sort of bemoaned was that, they can see more patients, but they still really can't add more staff. So they haven't quite figured all of this out yet in terms of the back end mechanics. But in terms of the easy stuff, you use an iPad, you connect, and now we've got an increasing number of connected devices. Philips has its suite, which when it was first introduced didn't really connect with anything except for other devices in the suite, and now it will connect with the cloud. So that in theory, all of your vitals, whether it's blood pressure, weight, if you're using a wireless blood glucose meter, your blood sugar, all of those things can be sent in real time to your care provider. So not only can they see you and your face and your physiognomy in real time, but they also can track how you're doing. And for chronic populations, this is really a critical matter, because what we know is that a variation in weight, for example, in somebody with chronic heart failure, or congestive heart failure, or high blood pressure, a variance of weight in 2-3 pounds in the course of a day or two could be the start of something really bad. And what this allows them to do is, see you in real time, and they can basically say, you know what, we have a problem here, and here's what you need to do about it, rather than waiting until it's an emergency and you have to go to the ER, or you've deteriorated. So it's really terrific in terms of controlling these large chronic populations, which affects millions and millions of folks over 50, 60, and so on.
Right, and as I mentioned before the show, and earlier this week, we interviewed a company called Medici. They do actually telemedicine, just like we're talking about. I know, quite fortuitous timing. And we were talking about their app that they're starting and how they're hoping to, they have big aspirations for changing the way medicine is practiced, in the U.S. of course, but of course around the world. And some of the stories that he relayed to me that were standouts to how his service, and again, his was an app, and you essentially match up your doctor with your patient through the app, and it's all kind of inclusive, kind of like WeChat, between doctor and patient. And he mentioned that it's not so much about doing things faster, but being more efficient with your time. And he had doctors who, before something like telemedicine, they would have to actually fly into the country. Maybe they had surgery in the United States, they're from somewhere else, and they actually had to fly back into the United States for their follow-ups. And with something like telemedicine, he had a story about in Miami. There was a surgeon who was able to kind of do the post-op, completely through the app. So, I mean, telemedicine has a lot of promise, not just for managing by exception, as you were explaining, but just doctors using their time more efficiently. So it's definitely going to catch on, I would think.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is going to compel this forward is the fact that so many people who are retired are not retiring to the spot where they've been living for the last 10, 20, 50 years. So, for example, somebody living in New England who may be spending his winters in Florida or who may have moved to Arizona doesn't want to start all over with an entirely new medical practice. So with telemedicine, I have friends right now who've retired to Florida who fly back up to the New York area once every 3 months just so they can check in with all their doctors. With telemedicine, theoretically, all of that can go away, and they're spared all of that expense. They're spared being back in the Northeast in the dead of winter and all that good stuff. But this is not to say that it's not without its impediments. And the biggest one, as you and I were talking about offline earlier, Ben, is that in the United States, we have 50 states with 50 sets of licensing agreements, licensing constraints, restrictions. And so in theory, a doctor who's based in New York and treating a patient based in Florida would need to be licensed in both New York and Florida. And you start multiplying that out, and until that issue is resolved, and I don't know if Medici had anything to say about this, but until that issue is sort of hashed out on the federal level or by all 50 individual states, that is going to still prove to be a problem. Even if Medicare is doing the payment or the insurance companies are doing the payment, the transaction itself may not necessarily be legally approved.
Right. Well, yeah, and the application, not to harp too much on Medici, but it really did seem like they were HIPAA compliant. They could share doctor records. They could actually bring other doctors into the whole equation if they wanted to. I mean, it was a pretty good system, but I did get the feeling that they were wading into uncharted waters, and they were kind of doing the whole it works now. Why ask for permission? But I can see how in the future, permission is certainly going to have to be asked for, because they in this one application, you actually kind of paid for your doctor interactions in the app through kind of either out of pocket or through your insurance approves it. But yeah, they really handled it kind of on a Medici to patient application, per basis. And they're just now starting to get more hospitals and of course insurance providers on board. But you're right. It's if there's one thing that I think our president has learned, and I think a lot of people have learned, it's healthcare. Who knew it would be this complicated? It's not simple.
Well, there are a couple of aspects to this. On the plus side, the fact that in the course of the last, I guess, 5, 6 years or so, most of our medical practices have transitioned to, EMRs or EHRs, electronic medical records, electronic health records. And increasingly, System A can be integrated with System B so that, a doctor in New York can pull up the records from his patient who may be down in Miami and who may have had a local provider there. So that's the good news. But the problematic part of it becomes what happens when there's a malpractice claim that crosses state borders? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, any kind of system that is going to be the middleman between the patient and the doctor, and that they claim any kind of loss of information or anything not clear, they're going to protect themselves. But yeah, I mean, liability in medicine always goes hand in hand. You have to make sure that every side protects themselves. I don't know, and so do you think this is going to take legislation to kind of bring into the fold, or is this going to be insurance agencies and hospitals themselves? I mean, when I'm sorry, what do you think is the big complicating factor, and when do you think telemedicine is really going to be, instead of the oh, it's this new thing, it's just catching on to it's standard compared to anything else? Like, when do you think it's going to telemedicine is standard instead of the exception?
Well, I think those are a couple of very different questions. Interestingly enough, I had a conversation. I was at a conference here in New York last week, done by David Kirkpatrick, the former tech editor for Fortune,
Hmm.
called Techonomy Health. And one of his speakers was a fellow by the name of Dr. Brian Donnelly, who's the chief of staff for Cleveland Clinic. Where they are already doing a lot of telemedicine, including multi-state, including Cleveland Clinic affiliates in Florida and in Las Vegas, and they don't seem to have run into any issues. One of the things that is actually enabling this is sort of bizarre, and that is that apparently medical assistants who end up doing a lot of the scut work in these processes do not have licensure issues, and so they can work across state lines without any problem. And so that seems to be one way around some of this. As to when this is going to take off, um, there are an awful lot of complicating factors, Ben, and it's tough for me to sort of make a prediction as to how long a lot of this stuff is going to take to get squared away. So I think what you'll be seeing is that with large hospital systems like a Kaiser, like a Cleveland Clinic, some of the major university medical centers, some of the major hospital systems like Memorial Sloan Kettering in the Cancer Center in New York, like Yale New Haven, like UCSD, Stanford, Scripps, and so on. I think you're going to see this spreading sooner rather than later, because Mayo Clinic is also another great example, because a lot of these folks have already picked up hospital affiliates and doctor affiliates and medical group affiliates in multiple states. So they have a very positive incentive to make sure all of this stuff is working right. And so that A, they can get paid for it, B, they can get paid for it, C, they can get paid for it. And everything else sort of, I wouldn't say everything else is irrelevant, but unless they can nail that one down, the rest of the stuff doesn't work. And so they're working very hard on that. I don't know that I've heard a whole lot about efforts in individual states to resolve the telemedicine issue. And I think that sort of what you alluded to earlier was that it's easier to ask forgiveness than ask permission. Maybe is sort of the operating rule here, which is, we're going to do it until you tell us we can't do it.
Right. And, that is how we see a lot of new technology come up because, let's face it, technology develops faster
Regulation? You betcha.
than regulation. Absolutely.
Just ask Uber and Lyft.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's you can be as agile as you want, but at some point you're going to be crossing a line that we didn't even think was possible. Self-driving cars or telemedicine or what have you. I mean, there's a lot of work I think coming in from private companies and things like Medici and applications and services that will offer it, but it's and I'm sure hospitals themselves are also working on their end, but when that bridge is gapped from both sides, that's when I think you're really going to pick up because let's face it, not a lot of people, or I mean, quite a few people actually, don't have access to good healthcare because they're too far away from hospitals. They're either rural, they're away from a specialist hospital. I mean, there's a lot of benefits, and I think when it's the consumer side, they get better care, and I think from the provider side, they get more customers. I mean, it's not going to be a decade. It's just going to be a few years. I really do feel
I think a
before.
lot of it's already here. One of the things that we didn't mention, but I think is really salient to this conversation, is the doctor to doctor part of this. I mean, the fact that it used to be that you would go take an X-ray, and if you needed to have that X-ray seen by another doctor, you'd actually have to put it in the mail and ship it. And now all of this stuff, and I mean just about all of it, is being instantly digitized so that any doctor anywhere can have access to these records. And you couple that with telemedicine, and it means that in the case of say, a difficult situation, you can get 2, 3, 5 doctors all together in a virtual space, all looking at the same diagnostics, all looking at the same imaging, and sort of kicking around the best way to approach a solution for this patient. You could never do that before. It just wasn't capable of happening. And so I think that's and there are tremendous efficiencies and life-saving efficiencies in doing something like that, especially as we get into more precision medicine, genomics, and the like.
Right. I'm not sure if we mentioned it with you or someone else, but the idea of essentially a call center, a help center for doctors in China, in India, somewhere that are highly trained, but never actually do FaceTime. Instead, there just kind of like they're when your laptop breaks, you call up Dell customer support, which may be in the U.S. I don't know, but you call customer support and they help you walk you through it. Or when your kidney explodes, you call up India and you talk to highly trained doctors, and they tell your doctor what's wrong. I mean, it's again fun possibilities of the future, and all that good stuff. But I think we've hammered telemedicine quite expertly, and but we actually have another medical thing here, because this is technology, I think, in its best form. And its best form is when it solves problems that before we all just kind of shrug our shoulders and went, well, do you have a spare kidney? Do you have a spare organ to deal with? But you have a story here, or at least you have a topic here that, and it's not a kidney, but rather an artificial pancreas. And so type 1 diabetes, it's of course a lot of people, more and more people are of course born with it, and it's happening to a lot of people. So a potential solution to that is very welcome, and it's good to see technology potentially playing a role. So what is this artificial pancreas that you mentioned here?
So let's start off by saying that the artificial pancreas is a bit of a misnomer. And the American Diabetes Association basically goes out of their mind when they hear the term used. Because what this is a coupling of two devices that have actually been around for some years so that they work together. And the first one of these that has been given FDA approval is from Medtronic. And it is, I think, more appropriately called a closed loop system. And while the term artificial pancreas certainly sounds sexy, the term closed loop system is actually a whole lot more accurate. Let's explain a little bit about what it does and then what it doesn't do, and why I think we sort of have to temper the hype with the reality.
Hmm?
The artificial pancreas closed loop system is comprised of two different devices. The first is a continuous blood glucose monitor, and we've had those around for a number of years from companies like Dexcom. And the other is a glucose pump, an insulin pump that automatically, injects you with insulin without you having to take out a syringe and do all that jazz. And it has a reservoir and just, keeps on pumping. So what they've done is essentially coupled the signal processing from one with the other. They're not even wired together. They work wirelessly through a sort of an intermediary device, so that the data from one is fed into the other. And so, in theory, by reading your blood glucose or your blood sugar on an ongoing basis, it can tell you how much insulin it should be delivering to you, how often.
Right.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
No, sounds great.
Here's a problem.
Okay.
The problem is when you start looking into it, it's like nobody's told the human body that it needs to cooperate with this. And so a lot of what happens in terms of diabetes is that when you start eating, um, it may take just a matter of a few moments before your blood sugar rises based on what you've eaten.
Hmm?
But it may take an hour if you give yourself a dose of insulin at the same time. It may take an hour before that insulin actually makes it into your system.
Hmm.
So the net result is that you could go from very high blood sugar to dangerously low blood sugar in a very short period of time. And that is one of the great problems with diabetes, is not only maintaining low blood sugar, but it's making sure that the blood sugar doesn't get too low. And so they are still, admittedly working on algorithms, and it's all about the algorithms in terms of the stability and efficacy of the artificial pancreas. It's the algorithms that will enable the system to sort of know, exactly how much to deliver when, based on what you're really doing. And until they get there, and they're not there yet, you as the end user still have to intervene with shots. You have to know, well, am I having a low carb meal? Am I having a high carb meal? And how do I need to adjust my own insulin level? Because it's going to take an hour or two before whatever insulin that I have is going to go into the system. And if I do it wrong, I don't lower my blood sugar enough. And if I do it wrong, I can pass out from very low blood sugar. So it's very encouraging. It's very, very encouraging, but it ain't there yet.
Right. No, it sounds really complicated, which, blood sugar, when if you're a diabetic, you deal with this, on a hour-to-hour, day-to-day basis. And I think technology is trying to do its best to automate the whole process. So, hey, you can live a normal life and not have to think about it. But, from your explanation, it obviously sounds like you are still going to have to keep on top of this, and you are still going to have to think about it, maybe not hour by hour, but maybe, meal to meal basis. So
right. So this reduces the need for ongoing human intervention, but it does not eliminate it.
Right.
And at the moment, it has been approved for type 1 diabetics, and type 1 is really only a fraction of the diabetic population, in the United States and worldwide. It has not yet been approved for type 2, and I think they want to get through all of the clinical trials on type 1, which so far have been very promising, before they start even approaching the mission of trying it out for type 2. So I think that still may be a couple of years away. But, let's get real.
And I think right there, everyone, is a great time to pause because we have to go take a break, Gary, and we'll come back with his one solution to fixing diabetes right here on Computer America. So stay tuned for more from Tech 50 Plus, Gary Kaye, and of course, Computer America. We'll be right back.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour, and if you're just joining us, welcome into the program. And yeah, we have Mr. Gary Kaye. He is the founder and chief content officer of Tech 50 Plus. We have a link to the website over in the show notes over at computeramerica.com. Or, very simply, Tech 50, the number 50 plus, spell out PLUS.com, and you can check out everything we're talking about and more. They have a lot of great articles and a lot of great sections for for adults of all ages. So, yeah, and Gary, I apologize for having to cut you off there so abruptly, but you mentioned that there was one thing that you were really looking forward to when it comes to diabetes, or that came out wrong, but please continue.
Yeah, it sure did, but it's all right. The disease that keeps on giving. Well, I mean, the reality is that, as far as I can see, the solution to diabetes, which is a failure of the pancreas, and its concomitant side effect, which is kidney failure, is in the lab, and that is the creation of stem cell solutions that can, basically regrow pancreatic cells that have ceased working, and eventually in the lab, probably 20 years out, you'll actually be able to craft an entire kidney from your own cells, and so you won't have any rejection issues at all, and they'll be able to just plug in your new kidney. And not have to worry about whether your body is going to go, I really don't like that kidney. I'm going to reject it.
Right.
So I think that is really the ultimate solution to both sets of problems. But I think that we're still, 20 years off on much of that. Interestingly enough, Ben, you and I have talked about the whole self-driving car thing.
Right.
And I think we mentioned the law of unintended consequences, which is that, there's a prediction that the number of cadaver kidneys available for donation is going to drop like a rock when self-driving cars come into their own, because they anticipate almost a 90% reduction in automobile fatalities.
Those pesky safety, all that safety that they're working into self-driving cars, there's going to be less people getting into car accidents or motorcycle accidents or what have you, and that will, fortunately, save people from accidents. But at the same time, that is one of the major ways that we do get donor kidneys. So, and this is something that has been bantered around by a lot of people, greater minds than myself, but this has been bantered around that maybe organ donation should be opt out instead of opt in, and things like that. But I'm not going to say hold off on self-driving cars because we need the dead bodies. Instead, I'm going to say that there are solutions beyond this, and stem cell, and like you said, we are already working on 3D printing organs. That is, that is certainly something that we are definitely working on as, not we ourselves, but scientists are working on 3D printed organs and skin grafts and things like that. I mean, where technology
it's grow your own organ.
Right, where technology take away, technology giveth, and hey, that's what we like to talk about here on Computer America. So, no, but that was great, and I'm sure for any listeners out there with diabetes, they know how serious of a condition it is, and they know how stressful it is to really monitor it. So, if nothing else, we've turned them on to closed loop systems or quote unquote artificial pancreases, and yeah, giving them a little bit of hope. So why don't we move on to telemedicine? That's one thing. But what about, and if I'm reading this right, telebabysitting or something akin to that, where you have an application here called Caibu, I believe.
Yeah, this is sort of interesting. I was at the Collision conference in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, where you basically see about 300 startups, 98% of whom are never going to make it. And this sorting the wheat from the chaff is really the interesting challenge at events like this. But one of the ones I came across was, as you mentioned, it's called Caibu, Caribu. And their website is caribu.co, CRIBOBU.co.
Mm-hmm.
And in essence, the woman who founded it, his name is Maxime, as opposed to Maxine Tuckman, explained it as a little bit like FaceTime meets Kindle. And when you look at the way the app works, that's actually functionally pretty accurate. So let's talk about sort of modern society. It used to be 3 generations ago, that it was not unusual for kids to stay very close to home when they grew up, had their families together. The grandparents could just run over and babysit. They could spend time with their kids. And one of the things I talk about in the piece that I did was that when I was growing up, my grandfather would drive from Brooklyn to Queens and pick me up on a nice Saturday, and we would spend the day together. And we'd go for lunch and go for a walk, and he'd buy me a little toy. And the great pleasure, for me, it was always fun, but you could see in his face how he lit up from ear to ear when he got to spend time with me, something I didn't understand until years later.
Right.
And today, that ain't the case. The kids are moving, 3,000 miles away. Up until a few years ago, the only way you could be in touch with your grandkids was on a telephone. And then we had video calls. But the video calls were not engaging. You would watch the kid run around the living room, or you could ask them some questions, but you really weren't engaged with the child. You really weren't having a common experience. You were like a voyeur. You were watching, the animals in the zoo, although maybe they would talk back to you.
Right.
But you really couldn't interact with them. So what Maxime did with Caibu was she developed an app that would basically allow grandparents and also business and traveling parents and separated parents to actively interact with their grandkids or their children and read books together, draw pictures together, and they could see each other in the window on a tablet or on a smartphone, so that you had that eye contact. Excuse me.
Oh.
But you could also follow along in the book.
Right.
And so it was really an engaged activity. It was the two of you reading this book together, where you could alternate who's going to read what. One of the most interesting things about this, and this is really what got me about it, was that when you think about it, there are tens of thousands, maybe even millions of families where the grandparents and the grandchildren don't even speak the same language. The grandparents are in China. The grandkids are in the States. The grandparents are in Haiti. The grandchildren are in Miami. And so not only, do you have the problem of not being able to engage, but when you do engage, you've got this huge barrier of language. And one of the things that Caibu is doing, right now they're in 6 languages, but the terrific thing is that in 2 of those languages, they are actually doing simultaneous translation, so that a kid in the States can listen to his grandmother in Szechuan, or Chengdu or wherever, reading a book, and the grandparent will see both the Chinese characters that he or she can read,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the English characters that the grandchild is reading. And the other language they're doing it in is French, and that's in large part because of the large Haitian community in Miami, which was an impetus for them. So that you now have a way for the grandkids and the grandparents to speak to each other in different languages and sort of learn each other's languages a little bit at a time, which is the way that you actually do learn a language, is by first associating the sounds and then associating the sounds with an image.
I mean, just real quick. I mean, does this build off of? I don't know. Skype, I know, is working on a solution. I think Facebook has a real-time translation solution. Is this building off of one of their platforms, or
No, no. What Caibu has done is, all of their stuff is centered around children's books. They've licensed content from about 20 different publishers, and it's a lot more complicated than just doing real-time translation, because you've got to actually draw the characters. You have to actually see the words, and so simultaneously in both languages. And so it's actually the publishers of these books who are providing this, and it's not been a fast process, which is why they've only launched in 2 languages with a small number of titles. But the fact that they can do it, I think, is just terrific. I mean, it bridges a gap that I didn't even know existed, and now I found out about it, and I go, geez, why didn't somebody think of this before? Well, no, there's always a first time.
right? Yeah, and again, this obviously, I think for other applications, you of course have very obvious things like FaceTime or Skype video calling or Facebook video calling. I mean, there are other solutions for like you said, just just talking back and forth. So I think finding your niche within that, and children's books, that's a great way, because let's face it, teaching kids to read at an early age, that's something that is very important, and anyone can do, be it a grandparent, a parent, and it's very enjoyable for for the parent and of course the kid as well. So very engaging.
What Caibu does is it also provides artwork and puzzles, so that the kid could start a drawing, and the grandparent can sort of step in and finish it off, or they can solve a puzzle together. And that's something that you really can't do with Skype or FaceTime.
Now, just to be clear, Caibu is not making their own tablet or anything. This is, an app.
It's
for
entirely you. It's entirely an app, and what Caibu is basically doing is saying, we want to make an app that will run on most of the major platforms. Their first platform is iOS. They're now trying to raise money to port it to Android, but they're also very interested in doing it as a web-based program as well, because so many older grandparents don't use smart devices, mobile devices. They're still using laptops or desktops. So they think that getting on that platform is critical. But so they actually never even undertook the effort of looking at proprietary hardware. And in fact, they started off with the notion of building their own content, where they were hiring authors and illustrators. And they went, boy, this is a losing proposition, because of all of the lead time that's involved and all of the effort. And they said, it's a whole lot easier for us to just license somebody else's content and get them to conform to what we're trying to do. And that's what they're doing. And the books are about 99 cents to $4 a piece. And they make it really approachable, because in each of the categories that they use, they do have some free books, so you can see if you like the system. And then with every book that you get, there are at least a couple of free pages. So before buying the book, you can see if the grandkid is going to like the book before you've invested even the $4. And then the kid goes, I really don't like this book. So there's none of that. They are talking about moving from the premium model to a subscription model sometime this summer, but they really haven't priced it, and I don't think they've got the nuts and bolts of that worked out quite yet.
Yeah, that is certainly something that I was going to ask about, would be cost, and I think a subscription model, those have really taken off lately. And I know another subscription, you don't want to hear about it, but it's definitely preferable to building up this large library one book at a time. But
can I tell you something? Grandparents who want to connect, and I hear this from contemporaries of mine who bemoan the fact that they've lost touch with their grandchildren, especially in the cases where their kids have gotten divorced, and their non-offspring now has custody of the grandchild. And I just hear horror stories about how difficult it is for these grandparents to stay in touch. And so this actually resolves a real issue. And most of the grandparents I know who are in situations like that would pay through their nose to have something that would keep them connected and engaged with their grandchildren as they're growing up. So I don't think that it's as much of a cost issue as some other things are.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, just real quick, do the parents have complete control over the purchasing power? Because kids, they do get into applications. Yes. Okay, perfect. So I just want to make sure of that. But no, I think you make a lot of great points with And
remember, you actually need to have accounts set up on 2 devices, so that both the grandparents and the grandchildren can share the device. So they need to have one account that will service both.
Right, absolutely. So no, and you're right. This is something that I guess personally, me being 26 years old, I have not really had to consider how I'm going to read to my grandkids when they're across the country. That's something that has rarely crossed my mind. So no, it's you're right. This is a solution to a problem that you didn't know existed, but after you heard about it, you say, "Oh, that's a great idea." So very, very cool, and yeah, definitely look back into that. So, all right, so Caibu, I think we are pretty squared away with that, and we can spend the last little segment of the show here talking about one of my personal favorites, because I'm seeing it in more and more places, and it hasn't caught on like I thought it would, or at least as fast as I hoped it would. But I'm seeing gamers specifically, because that's kind of my audience, really start to pick up on it. But you have virtual reality. That's of course what I'm alluding to, and the benefits to an older generation, because having current realities, they are very limiting at some point. For a lot of older people, and virtual reality really has a lot of promise for these audiences. So, what are some of the key factors do you think that and just to be clear, virtual reality in its current state is pretty complicated. Finding experiences, finding games, downloading the games, installing the hardware, getting the hardware. Second of all, I mean, it's pretty tech complicated. So it would be a pretty big investment for, I would think, anyone to get into virtual reality. So what makes you think that older generations should kind of bridge, jump that gap and go, all right, let's invest in virtual reality?
All right, so let's parse out this audience a little bit. Being over 50 doesn't mean you're dead yet, and the interests of somebody who's 50 are going to be somewhat different than folks who are 70, and far different from folks who are, say, 90.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's break it out a little bit according to audience. And so we're seeing very different things in each of these audiences. So right now, you've got a lot of hotels, cruise lines, and so on that are starting to offer VR apps to promote their own properties. So you're interested in taking a cruise to the Caribbean? You want to see what the ship looks like. You want to see what your stateroom looks like. You put up one of these apps, put on your VR goggles, wander around the stateroom, go, oh, I like that. But you know what? I think I like the one with with the outside view better. Or, gee, I'm really not a big shrimp fan, but whatever.
Right.
But you really get a sense. Autumn, that's going to be a great way for people to take a look even before they walk into a showroom at the cabin of a new car. Gee, I really like the way this instrument panel is laid out. How do I like the view? How do I like the lines? So that's another thing. And so we're seeing a lot of that stuff already being developed by private companies to promote their own products. The next thing is travel apps. So right now, I'm probably going to be going to Israel in November, December of this year. And there are apps that can let me take a tour of most of the places that I want to visit in VR, so that I can really get a sense as to what I do want to see, what I might not want to bother seeing, and what to expect when I get there. All right. So, that's sort of a mid-level kind of group.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's move to the older folks. Let's move to the folks who are really housebound or institution bound. And they've never been to Machu Picchu, and they're not going to make it there. That's just the reality.
Right.
But with VR, you could actually go, hike up Machu Picchu and see what it looks like. And what we're seeing, because this actually gets your question about the complication, we're seeing that thanks in large part to some of the research that was done by the MIT Age Lab, there are solutions now for groups in nursing homes, in assisted living homes, where they'll put 5, 10, 15 folks in a room, all with VR headsets on, all enjoying the same experience of an outing on Machu Picchu. And you can hear the oohs and the ahs, because they're all, wandering together up this mountain in VR. That's something that's absolutely, couldn't have been done before.
Yeah, that is, and I've seen it in again, I'm going to reference back to to gamers. You wouldn't think that something's simple experiences that I've seen where maybe it's just a bunch of people standing at podiums answering trivia questions, and being able to let's say that someone answers before you, being able to kind of look over to your left and kind of wave at them and say sucker, whatever, I'm better than you. Like, that adds a whole nother element to a simple experience. It's just having other people there.
Right. It becomes a social experience. And remember that a big problem for older folks is social isolation. So this is something that in the real world can help resolve issues of social isolation, because in theory, the people could do this collective activity from their individual homes or their individual rooms and still be part of a collective.
Well, and I just really wanted to drive home the point to everyone that this isn't so much just a simple, everyone, hitting play on the same video at the same time. No, it's much more social than just a movie theater experience. This is, a step beyond that.
Right. Now, the other place where this is being used, and this is where I find it being fascinating, is we're seeing VR being used in therapeutic sessions. The most extreme of which is they're using VR to help people with traumatic brain injury, TBIs, to remap their brains patients using VR,
Hmm?
but increasing. I mean, and the more broad application that I'm seeing is for dementia. And what the folks at MIT have done, and I'm now seeing it being done by a company called Endeavor, which is trying to sell VR services to families and to institutions. And they will actually create a VR experience based on where you grew up and what your neighborhood was or where you traveled to. And they have found that this has had tremendously positive results with Alzheimer's patients in terms of allowing them to stay focused, allowing them to remember the things that happened in their lives 40, 50, 70 years ago that that those memories would otherwise just be gone. And apparently it works. And it's certainly not a medical solution, but it's an experiential solution that is apparently doing wonders for the attitude of these folks.
That is certainly something that I think, and if you've ever experienced anyone with dementia or anything like that, you can tell that there you see glimpses of the person that they used to be. Obviously, it's not all there, but when you can pull their personality back out, when you can pull their memories back out, I mean, it really does make their day, and to know that virtual reality does exactly that. Definitely something to sit up and take notice of. And just real quick for anyone out there who may be listening, I mean, this is a technology that if you're willing to make the time investment and make the monetary investment, you can start experiencing some of this now. So, I mean, do you
And
have
it's
any?
not that much of a monetary investment. I mean, besides like Google Cardboard, which costs nothing, the earlier versions of Samsung's Gear VR are out there for about 40, $50 for a headset. And not only do most of these applications not need the Bluetooth head controller, the fact is that the Bluetooth head controller is just going to make a lot of people dizzy and disoriented. So I mean, you don't need it.
Right.
All you need is a Samsung smartphone, a compatible Samsung smartphone, and $50 glasses. And so it's not a huge investment. Um, but I think that what we're seeing is that more and more folks are now catching on to this and developing applications, and I think that's going to drive the market, and it's in a very different direction. It's very exciting to me as well.
Right, and that's what and I think you jumped ahead of me there, but solutions that people could look for, because obviously when I meant monetary investment, I was thinking things like the Oculus Rift that are $700 on top of $1,000 computer, and you're looking at close to $2,000 for bare minimum specs for true virtual reality. But you're right, using your smartphone, that's if you already have a Samsung phone, which is $400 or $500, then it's a $40 investment.
Yeah, so I mean, the barrier to entry from that perspective is still pretty low, and the fact is that, as I say, institutions are now starting to buy these things in bulk to use for their residents,
Right.
and I think that's encouraging as well. One of the last things I want to point out before we go is that one of the experiences that they have found that is the best for retaining or resurrecting memories is
90
music.
seconds.
It's the music you grew up with, and playing those songs brings back memories. I mean, let's face it, all of us have associations with songs when we were growing up that trigger fond memories. Well, some of them may trigger not so fond memories, like breaking up songs, but anyway, and this has been true for these dementia patients as well.
Right.
They've been able to
60
get an
seconds.
awful lot of memories
Right.
simply by
And
playing those old songs.
makes perfect sense. And Gary, we're gonna have to cut it off right there. We have like 20 seconds. If people want to find out more, tech50plus.com, I assume.
You betcha.
All right, perfect. So everyone out there, once again, Gary Kaye, founder and chief content officer of Tech 50 Plus. We have links at Computer America to everything we've talked about here today. Check them out at your soonest convenience. And I want to say, Gary, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for fitting us in to your busy schedule.
Always a pleasure, man.
All right, thank you, sir. And so, everyone else out there, thank you so much for tuning in to Computer America. Catch us tomorrow as we have on, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Nathan Evans of Pop Zara Magazine. So, we'll catch you then. Everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.
10 seconds.